What's up, guys? This is Nate, One Man's Odyssey, doing a backpacking trip. I'm here today in southern New Mexico in the Apache Kid Wilderness. I'll tell you guys some more about the details of this trip later. I am hiking with two friends, Layne and Devin. What we've got going on right now is a 3-night backpacking trip in the Apache Kid Wilderness. One of those days being kind of a 0-day hike up to West Blue Mountain. The plan on this trip is we're gonna hike to the, might not be anymore, the Myers Cabin on the south side of the wilderness, and hike up Vic's Peak today. Tomorrow the goal is to hike to San Mateo Peak, which is in the center of the wilderness and has a fire tower on it. And then the plan the next day is to do a day hike to West Blue Mountain, and then day 4 we'll hike down through Indian Canyon back to the cars. This trip, I've been planning it for a long time, basically, or at least I've had the plan set up. Probably my first realization of this plan came 5 or 6 years ago, and I was originally planning on doing it November 2020, actually the day I did the Sabinosa Wilderness trip. But then I learned that the Vic's Peak fire was very large and destroyed a lot of the wilderness, as you've probably seen. Thankfully right now we're not really hiking in Burn Scar, but I think we're about to get in it. Anyway, it's only been in the last 2 years that the area's seen significant clearing. I still think we'll hike in some uncleared areas, but the bulk of the hike should be on nice cleared trail. The main challenges on this trip are gonna be, for one, the wind. As you can probably hear, today is a red flag warning. So if we can get through today, we should be good the rest of the trip. Tomorrow it does expect to be high winds, but after that it's just breezy. And then the biggest thing I'm concerned about is water sources. You know, this is a Sky Islands range. Beneath us, behind us, is desert. And in these Sky Islands ranges, they tend to be much lusher, much greener than the surrounding desert. For reference, West Blue Mountain is the highest mountain of the range. It's around 10,300 feet. And while they are lusher and greener, and there are water sources, they're pretty unreliable. I think 25-yard spring is the most reliable source of the trip. As long as that source is running, we should be fine. It'd be nice if Nave Spring was running, or Meyer Spring. I keep forgetting which it is. But 25-yard spring is the crux of this trip. All right, just about a quarter mile back, maybe less, we turned onto the Shipman Trail going south. Like I said, the plan tonight is to camp by Myers Cabin, which is on the saddle between San Mateo Mountain and Vic's Peak. And hopefully there will be running water on the way up to that cabin. And this is the Nave Spring. So we've got a little bit of flow and some decently clear water in the trough. So we're at Nave Spring. As you saw, it has water, very small trickle, a couple small trickles, and then of course that pond. I think we'll have no problem staying hydrated. The original plan was we were gonna go up to the saddle between San Mateo Mountain and Vic's Peak. I think there's Myers Cabin is up there. I have no idea if it's still standing or not after the fire. And that was the original plan, but that plan was formulated when we weren't entirely sure if there would be water here. Now that we know that there's water here, we're thinking that it is probably making more sense to just camp here overnight. And that way our hike up to Vic's Peak and back will only be a day hike. Won't have to have the packs on. It'll be a lot easier, and we'll be right by water. The only downside I would say to this plan is that, you know, we're in a canyon. But I do think, just looking around, that there are enough decent camp spots, and we don't really have to worry about flash flooding or anything tonight. It's supposed to be dry for this entire trip. The other benefit to camping in here is like I mentioned, it's red flag warning today. It's supposed to be really high winds. It's entirely possible that we go up to that saddle and just the winds are insane. So staying down here, we know the winds are going to be calm because right now it's much calmer than it was when we were like on the ridge. So we decided that we're going to camp here overnight, and then we'll have less to hike tomorrow, and we have less to hike with our packs on today. So it's kind of a win all around. So we made it to where our original night one camp was. It was a tough hike. I don't know if I'm deacclimated, out of shape, all of the above, but I'm pretty tired. I'm pretty worn out. We've got about an 800-foot climb to get to Vic's Peak from here, off trail. I think we'll be able to do it. Really the big thing right now is my back just hurts. I guess I'm just not used to carrying a backpack, even though the kids in the baby backpack are about the same weight, and I've been doing a lot of that, so I don't know. I'm just feeling beat, but we're gonna give it the old college try to make it up to Vic's Peak, and then thankfully it's all downhill to our new camp. Can't remember if I mentioned, but I didn't see a cabin up here, so even though there's a Myers cabin on the map, don't see it. There's a really big hole that's pretty weird. It's like 12 feet deep. I can't imagine people doing that, but who knows? I'm not the only one who's beat. The other two guys are beat. Honestly, if I didn't have my peak bagging thing, I'd probably turn around, but I really want to do Vic's Peak. San Mateo Peak tomorrow, I'm more willing to not do, especially since I don't think we'll be able to enjoy the fire tower with it being so windy. But Vic's Peak is one that I've really wanted to do, so I'm headed up there. Hopefully it'll only take me about an hour, hour and a half, and then I'm headed down. I'm about 250 vertical feet from Vic's Peak right now, about half a mile hiking. It's literally been a class 2 scramble for the last quarter mile. I'm worn out, but the scrambling is forcing me to go at a slower pace, which is making me feel a little better. I'm hoping I can get there pretty quickly from here because, like I said, it levels out at about 10,000 feet. So pretty soon it'll be kind of a smooth sailing trip to Vic's Peak. I think that's Layne and Devon way down there. So that's where I started from, and here's all the talus I've been scrambling up. Well, I'm kind of shielded from the wind here. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of Victorio, Vic's Peak, why it's called that. Basically, and I'm not an expert on this stuff, I just read a book and some Wikipedia articles. But Victorio was a leader of the Warm Springs band of the Western Apache. I believe they're also called Chihenne. It's considered maybe a subgroup of the Chiricahua. It gets very confusing for me, but anyway. So, Ojo Caliente, Warm Springs, is now more known today as the Monticello Box. I assume Monticello Box is just a small portion of Ojo Caliente region, but it's Piñata Alamosa, basically, just south of the Apache Kid Wilderness. And so Victorio was, by the standards of the time, by the standards of Apache leaders of the time, pretty willing to play ball with the U.S., the U.S. Army. Initially, they were moved to, I think it was called the Tularosa Reservation. I believe that's where near Reserve, New Mexico is now. I think that's actually how it got its name. And, you know, he would tell the military commanders, you know, there's nothing wrong with this place, but it's not our home. We don't like it. Please send us back. But whatever you do, don't send us to go live with the other Apache bands, because there were a lot of rivalries and feuds between them. So one of the army leaders, I can't remember his name, eventually allowed them to move back to Warm Springs, Ojo Caliente, and built a reservation for them there. And basically, like less than a year later, the Indian agency officer of the area said, nope, pack your things up, you're headed to the San Carlos Indian Reservation to live with the other bands. This represents a bigger issue in, for lack of a better word, Indian policy in late 1800s US. Basically, you had the army go in, and the army, if they were competent, would manage to subdue the Indians, and find a solution that worked for them. One that resulted in fairly minimal raiding, large scale raiding, but maybe, you know, maybe they'd let a few things slide here and there to keep the general peace. And that was considered pretty unacceptable by the townspeople and the Indian agents as well. Also, the Indian agents were political appointments, normally people who had no experience doing anything of importance, usually religious leaders, and consciously so. But, you know, I wouldn't want my parish priest running, you know, being my mayor necessarily. I don't have any reason to believe that he would do a good job. So you can imagine, well, you're not just a mayor, you're basically the governor of a people who are completely different than you. You know nothing about them, and you know, maybe have idealistic vision of what they should be doing. And on top of that, they were often corrupt, even maybe like unconsciously so. I think they just viewed a lot of times that they had to play the games in order to make things work, whereas the army seemed to get by without doing that. So back to Victorio, he didn't like hearing that he'd go to live on San Carlos, so he escaped with a bunch of other people and basically began a raiding journey that I think went south and west into Arizona before he crossed over into Mexico and raided there. Eventually, he was killed, or more properly, committed. I bet that'll flag on YouTube. Anyway, he did that at the Battle of Tres Castillos, which is a rock formation meaning 3 castles in Mexico. Basically there, he was surrounded. All of his, you know, members of his band were killed, and he elected to stab himself, ending his own life. So to my knowledge, this is one of 2 places named after Victorio. Obviously this peak, and then there's another Vic's Peak just south of here. So kind of confusing that they're right next to each other. I almost wonder if there was some confusion that led to the name being applied to both. But it's a very appropriate name given that the Monticello box just south of here was basically his home. It's a little bit more appropriate than Apache Kid for the Apache Kid Wilderness. And I will talk to you guys about that either tomorrow or the next day. The story of the Apache Kid. I think it's a pretty interesting one, and why I don't think that this wilderness has much of anything to do with the Apache Kid. Anyway, we're doing the final push to Vic's Peak, I think about 150 vertical feet. So there have been a lot of things that make it very obvious this is a volcanic range. One of them is all the vent holes. Can't remember if I showed you guys, but at the pass there's a huge hole that, like, I have no idea where it could have come from. I assumed it was volcanic, but this is a volcanic vent hole, and cold air is blowing out of it. It's pretty awesome, and it's pretty deep. Yeah, so like my trekking pole goes all the way down there, and I think it would probably go down further if it was more flexible. Oh yeah. Vic's Peak. Woo! Weirdly, at this one spot on the summit, it's a lot less windy, but my time on Vic's Peak has come to a close. I'm headed down now, back to the saddle with Devin and Layne. I hope that they aren't concerned about me. I told them if it's been 3 hours or more, be concerned, because I'm pretty used to off-trail mountain climbing, and I suspected there might be a scramble, and there was. So I was budgeting about an hour each way, and it was definitely about an hour up. So hopefully they don't get worried that it's taken me, you know, probably will end up being a little over 2 hours to get up and down. We're back at Nave Spring. I think this will be my tent site. I'm gonna set up and then start doing some work, collecting water. We got dinner and beers going, courtesy of Layne. The water is kind of murky, so it's taking a long time to filter all of it, but we got the backfill thing. It's just, yeah, this is the least fun part of This is why I prefer day hikes. So you don't have to do this kind of crap for an hour after you get to camp. But so I'm mostly set up because it's supposed to be pretty windy tonight. I'm gonna stake out all my guy lines. But so far the new tent, the trekking pole tent, the Hyperlight Mountain Gear Mid 1 is standing up well to the wind that we've been getting so far. I did break a trekking pole. Had nothing to do with, well, it had something to do with the tent, but it wasn't the tent's fault. I just was adjusting it and it snapped around the locking mechanism. So I'm down to one trekking pole. So I cannot break the other one. Otherwise I won't have a tent. Feeling a lot better. Got some simple sugars in me. Dinner tonight was this, I don't even know what brand it is, Pro Adventure Meal Chili Pork Verde. It had good green chili flavor. Layne showed out. He packed each of us a beer. So I'm joining that right now, and I don't need to review this one because I've already done it. You guys know how much I love La Cumbre Elevated IPA. So Layne has good taste. The wind has actually somewhat died down a little bit, which I'm surprised about. I thought if anything it would pick up until around midnight. So I'm enjoying it right now. The trekking pole tent is holding up for now. So fingers crossed, wish me luck. Good morning. We are all in the process of either eating or packing up. Tent went well last night. Definitely you could hear the wind just roaring overhead, but in our little canyon here, we were pretty sheltered. Had a breakfast of tea and a biscuit. Plan today, like I said, we're gonna hike to 25 Yard Spring with a potential side trip to San Mateo Peak. That should only add about 2 miles round trip, I think. But it will add significant elevation gain, so we'll see how we feel when we get there. The main draw of San Mateo Peak is that there's a cabin up there and a fire lookout, though I don't really know what the condition of those are after the fire of 2020. Like I said, it is supposed to be windy today. I think it's a fire watch weather warning today versus yesterday, which was red flag. So should be better than yesterday. I'm gonna keep packing up my tent, pack up all my stuff, and then we'll get ready to head out. We reached San Mateo Spring, which is predictably dry. I'm not sure I saw any trip reports that weren't, or that didn't say that this was dry. We just reached the intersection with the Cowboy Trail. Our ultimate goal for the day is 25-yard spring, which is like probably 2 miles that way, and a good 1,000 feet of elevation loss. But after we head up San Mateo Peak for the day, we'll be done with elevation today. And what I'm expecting to see up there is a fire tower, a cabin. We'll see what's still around after the fire. But anyway, we're gonna head up. It's probably about 3/4 of a mile and about 500 feet of elevation gain. We made it to the summit. Cabin was unlocked. We were able to look inside. Lots of mouse droppings, but not as gross as some cabins I've seen. I didn't see if there was a broom in there, but if you swept it all out, you could probably make a nice little home for the night. And here's the fire tower still standing. I'll be honest, I'm not going all the way up, especially with all this wind. Fire towers kind of weird me out, but I might climb up 1 or 2 stories to see if we can get some views. I'm glad I went to Vic's Peak yesterday after kind of waffling about it, because there's not too many views up here. I suppose if you were able to get to the top of the fire tower, you might get views, but it's really, like, the more we looked at it, it's very unsafe. The bottom ladder isn't even attached. The second the second floor of the steps isn't even there. There's no wood. So I cannot recommend planning on climbing up that. But we do get a view for tomorrow's goal, which is West Blue Mountain. One of the things we've been debating on this trip is what to do day 4. The original plan for day 4 was to descend from Indian Canyon to the Windmill Trailhead where my car is parked and shuttle us back to Springtime Campground. Looking at about a 9-mile day, probably about 3,500 feet of elevation loss and probably about 800 feet of gain. And that's not including any kind of up and down along the way. That's just sort of the base level of gain and loss. And the more that we think about it, the less likely we are to do that. It's, of course, the Vic's Peak fire hit this whole area, and as we get into areas that haven't been cleared, we're starting to get an idea of what Indian Canyon might be like. Before the fire, Indian Canyon was considered a very rugged, difficult trail, and we're a tad worried that with all the deadfall potentially and any flash flooding, it might be in really rough shape. The last mile or so we just did was pretty bad burn area. It even looked like it had been cleared maybe within the last 2 years and just more deadfall had come. Not the most pleasant to hike through. To be honest, that's kind of what I expect the hike tomorrow to West Blue Mountain to be like. We made it to 25-yard spring. There's a few decent campsites over here. We don't actually know that there's water in the pipe yet, but Layne said he saw water flowing down in the canyon, so we think it's a pretty safe bet we'll be able to camp here tonight with water. So we've been at camp for probably about 4 or 5 hours. I'm hanging out in my tent right now. It's a little windy outside, plus I'm trying to be cozy. And mostly just been hanging out, ate dinner, played some chess. That was kind of fun. I haven't played chess probably since high school. The wind was really intense like 3 hours ago. It's definitely died down since then. Knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't pick back up too much before bedtime. But San Mateo Peak was pretty cool. I mean, I don't think it would really be worth a trip in and of itself. It is a 1,000-foot prominence peak. There was a cabin there. Layne pointed out after I mentioned you could sweep it out. That sweeping is actually what causes hantavirus, because it puts all the the infection into the air and then you breathe it in. So I guess you don't want to do that. So the plan tomorrow is about a 9-mile hike, out and back day hike. We're gonna just leave camp set up, and we've got probably about a pretty big gain to start off the day to get up to the ridge, and then from there it's probably like a few hundred feet of gain and loss as we work our way to West Blue Mountain, which is the main goal for the day. It's the 3,000 foot prominence peak, and we may hit a couple other peaks on the way, Blue Mountain, Apache Kid Peak. The second goal of the day is to hit the Apache Kid grave site. I don't know if there's anything there. I found no information online about whether there's a headstone, a marker, or anything. I sort of guess that there's going to be nothing, but it'd still be kind of cool to go there. So while the Apache Kid grave site is listed to be pretty close to the Cyclone Saddle, there's a lot of reasons why I don't believe that the Apache Kid is actually buried there or ever was buried there. The Apache Kid Wilderness has his name, right? It's the Apache Kid Wilderness. And I guess that's because his grave is here, but the story of the Apache Kid is a very complicated one, and one that's shrouded in a lot of mystery. Basically, long story short, the Apache Kid was a Western Apache. He was a U.S. Army scout. And when one of the downsides of moving all the, one of the side effects of moving all the Apache onto the same reservation is that even among the Western bands, there was still a lot of feuding and infighting and grudges, and that often bubbled over, especially when alcohol was involved, bubbled over into pretty significant violence. So the Apache Kid's father, the Apache Kid was born, I think, during the Civil War. This would have been in, I want to say, the 1880s. The Apache Kid's father was killed at one of these, Tiswin parties. And per Apache custom, basically the Apache Kid was, had the right to retribution. And so he and some other Apaches basically carried that out. They killed their his father's killer. I don't think he did that. That was somebody else. But he killed another one of the people responsible for his father's death. Basically, he was summoned to the scout headquarters to undergo questioning. I think he was being arrested, actually. And while he was at the scout headquarters, there was basically an attack or raid on the camp from other Apaches. In the melee, he took weapons and basically escaped. Also, in all the confusion and chaos, the Apache scout leader, not an Apache man, a German man named Sieber, he broke his ankle pretty severely, got a pretty bad injury. I think he was actually shot in the ankle. And so the Apache Kid escaped, and he and some other, the other people who were being arrested basically lived life on the lam. Eventually, they are captured, and they undergo federal trial, given that they were in the service of the U.S. Army. And it's not for the revenge killing of the Apache Kid's father, it's basically for their escape. And, there's no evidence that suggests, and it seems like genuinely they didn't plan this escape routine, but there's no evidence that suggests that that raiding party that was there was trying to free the Apache Kid and the other Apaches. And they basically did what anybody in that situation would do, which is grab a weapon and get away. And so, despite that, they were convicted to death by, I think, firing squad. But pretty quickly, higher ups said, there's no evidence to convict them of death. That's too strong. That sentence was commuted to 5 years in Alcatraz, the famous Alcatraz. And then that sentence was then further commuted to, I think, 18 months in Alcatraz. After that, Apache Kid gets out. But Sieber, who I mentioned earlier, was really mad that the Apache Kid basically got free. He's essentially a cripple now, and he blames the Apache Kid for that. So he basically convinces the Arizona courts to try them on the same crimes of essentially was mutiny. And it's not double jeopardy because they weren't being tried by the federal government again. They were being tried in a state court, and there they were convicted and sentenced to prison. But while being transported to Yuma, by stagecoach, they were basically able to overpower the stagecoach driver and the guards, killed one of them. One of them had a heart attack, one of the stagecoach guards or drivers. And then the last one was wounded, but not mortally. And I guess the Apache Kid intervened. This is according to the man himself. The Apache Kid intervened to one of the other Apaches who was intending to kill him. He said, no, spare his life. And after that moment, the Apache Kid basically faded away into myth and legend. Pretty much from that point on, for the next 40 years, anytime there was any kind of cattle rustling or raiding or anything, and someone was maybe an Indian or an Apache, the Apache Kid was kind of blamed for it. And I've read that the most likely path his life took was he may have died in Arizona. The other one is like maybe he moved to Mexico to live with the Tarahumara Indians. But one of the stories is basically some ranchers in New Mexico went after some cattle rustlers. One of them was the Apache Kid, and they killed him out here in what is now the Apache Kid Wilderness. Supposedly I don't think they buried him. I think they just let him there. And then to make the story even more unbelievable, apparently locals then quickly came, all wanted a souvenir of the Apache Kid, and so they took his bones and all his possessions and took them away, so there's no sign of his body. Isn't that very convenient? And this story is just obviously not true. At least the other stories about the Apache Kid, people had something of his that belonged to him or that may have belonged to him. But this story, there's just no evidence at all that it was the Apache Kid. And so I'm very doubtful that the Apache Kid died in this wilderness. In some sense, this is the reason why I wanted to hike Vic's Peak so badly yesterday, even though I was so worn out and so tired, was because Victorio is actually from this area. He's from just southwest of here. And that peak is really like more like this wilderness, and that peak is much more connected with Victorio than the Apache Kid Wilderness is most likely with the Apache Kid. Now, that's not to say that he didn't come to this wilderness when he was scouting, or, you know, like he may have come here, but certainly that connection when it comes to his death is very tenuous. Hung our food bags. We're gearing up to do our day hike of West Blue Mountain. Maybe find the Apache Kid gravesite. Just doing a little bit of route finding here. We're on the Apache Kid Trail just below Apache Kid Peak, and it's obvious it's a complete mess. It's not really even a trail. The only way you can kind of see that there may have been a trail is old cut. Really, the issue is not so much the deadfall. I think it's more of the brush and the aspen sprouts are really making it hard to identify where the trail is. Even in cut portions of the trail, there were aspen sprouts starting to come up. So you know, this area, not seeing much maintenance, is kind of being reclaimed. We've made it to Cyclone Saddle, just a little bit further to West Blue Mountain.
Is this the top? Probably no water.
Blue Mountain. So here we are, Blue Mountain. I think the true summit is right behind me. You can see you got something of a view, but not too much. It doesn't help right now. When we woke up, we smelled smoke pretty intensely. And at first we thought it may have just been the fire from 5 years ago still smelling, but now we are, well, at least I'm pretty sure that I think it's the iron fire near Silver City. So not too much in the way of views. That was San Mateo Mountain that I was just showing you, and I think San Mateo Peak in front of it, or maybe that was Vic's Peak way in the back. It's a little hard to tell, but yeah, very hazy. Oh yeah. So this is the continuation of the Apache Kid Trail towards Cub Spring. This looks like it might be the trail that goes over West Blue Mountain. I have a feeling we're gonna have to do bushwhacking no matter what, but let's go this way and see where it takes us. I think Layne is at the summit of West Blue Mountain. You can see we're pretty much totally in the trees, but we might be able to get out and get some views. There's the summit register signed. So as you can see, it's tree covered, not 360-degree views, but you still get a couple really nice views. That view to the south is especially really solid. So is the view to the north. It's pretty hazy right now because of that fire I mentioned. The farthest I could really see to any definition was Allegris Mountain, which is not that far away. So there's not that much to see anyway, given the haze, but still a nice view from the peak. I think if you were considering doing this peak alone, it would definitely be worth it. Of course, like I said, it's a 3,000-foot prominence peak. I think it's like the 12th or something most highest or most prominent peak in New Mexico. And it's the highest point of this wilderness. This is quite a journey to get here, both the last few days and just I've been wanting to do this peak for such a long time. It's really the closest peak to me other than Mount Phillips that I have on the 2,000-foot prominence list. So we're getting into the territory where these mountains are just so far away and not really that feasible to do as a day hike. I think last time I attempted this mountain was April of last year, and it wasn't really an attempt. It was when I did Madre Mountain and Eagle Peak, and basically I had miscalculated the amount of driving I had to do, had done like 9 hours of driving and still had to drive home, and was facing like a potential 3-hour drive to this trailhead, then do that and drive home, and didn't want to do it. I think actually Layne made fun of me for complaining about all the driving. He made a comment complaining about it, and to get back at him I conspired this whole plot to invite him out and make him hike up the mountain that he was ribbing me for being tired of driving for. So we're gonna head back. Devin stayed behind. He was feeling pretty worn out, which is totally understandable. And there was also a sickness scare in between there that seems to have resolved itself. So we're gonna head back, maybe have a quick lunch, but then we'll head back to Cyclone Saddle, where I will make an attempt to find what I believe is the non-existent Apache Kid grave. We're at the Cyclone Saddle, eating lunch. It's living up to its name. It's a lot windier than it was pretty much the entire hike. I'm off in search of the Apache Kid's grave. I'm at what I think is the Cold Spring Trail, and that's basically where the Apache Kid gravesite is according to my GPS. I don't see anything. And it was really brutal to get down here. I probably descended about 100 feet in like 200 feet of horizontal distance. So it was definitely a tough downhill. I'm gonna try to look for a trail to get back up. Otherwise, I'm kind of scrambling up. But no sign of the Apache Kid grave. I think that Such a thing does not exist in a marked form. Well, this is where my GPS says the gravesite is, and there's really no indicator of anything. I've never heard of there being an indicator here. I just want to go check it out for myself. Of course, if the Apache Kid did die here, or anybody for that matter, we pay respect no matter what they did in life, but I would not recommend coming out here to try to search for the grave because there's nada here. I will say there's one other spot, I guess south of here, along the slope of a sub-peak to Blue Mountain, that the Forest Service map said was the Apache Kid grave site, but that Forest Service map seems to be so wrong on so many things that I don't think that I would really believe that. For what it's worth, on the official printed Forest Service map that I have, no mention of a grave or anything. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that there's nothing here to be found. If you do go to the other site, please let me know, but definitely here, which is right along the Cold Spring Trail, nothing to be found. Hey guys, Nate from the future. As you know, I did find out after the trip that the Apache Kid grave, or the supposed Apache Kid grave, was in fact marked by a metal sign and a mark on the tree. Of course, this area was hit by the fire, so I do not anticipate that there is any marked tree anymore. And I will say that right after this, maybe 5 minutes after saying this statement, while I was climbing back up, I did find a sheet metal piece. It was kind of rusted. It didn't look in good shape, but it was long like that sign in the picture. And I do believe actually that that was the sign from the picture. This whole area was hit by the fire, so I can imagine that the heat from the fire may have peeled off the paint, making the sign unrecognizable, probably fell off the tree itself probably got burned, and maybe through high winds it was removed from this spot. But I do believe now, in retrospect, that that was the sign. In the moment, I did pick it up and inspect it and concluded it wasn't a sign, because I had assumed that if there was some kind of marker, it would have been maybe stone or wood and not a printed metal sign, which obviously I was wrong about based on the picture I showed you earlier.
Across that big ass log though.
Oh yeah, well, we're gonna come up to the 25-yard spring.
All right, back at camp, feels good. I was pretty beat. Really, the thing that's bothering me the most is my feet. They're sore, but also just, I've been getting a lot of chafing. I don't normally chafe with these boots, so I'm wondering if maybe it's just time to replace them, because yeah, the chafing's pretty bad. It's not really even blisters, it's just like bad chafing. So I do have some tape, so I think tomorrow I'll probably slap some tape on, let them air out for now, and then maybe slip on some liners for the day. Yeah, not having a great time. I think I'm also gonna loosen them. Chilling at camp, making dinner. At least I am. Today's dinner is Polish ramen. Not really, but it's grzybowa, which I think is mushroom soup. So I've been really excited to try this. It's been hard not to eat it at home, but I was saving it for this camping trip. It's morning, and look who's in their hidey hole. Layne, the cowboy camper, found this nice little rock outcropping to camp under. He looks like a little troll or something. So I'm packing up here. We're trying to get an early start today. They got a long drive to Tucson that they want to do today, not break it up into 2 drives. I want to get home and see the family, take a shower. So we're aiming for about a 7 a.m. start. It's about 6:15 right now. I think we'll have no problem hitting that.
He would talk to us about, you know, because he's always trying to get some work done, you know, just kind of how to go about construction.
You wanna just selfie it?
Selfie? I mean,
I don't know.
those never turn out that good.
I mean, I agree, but like, what?
All right, that's the end of the trip. Thanks a lot to Layne for coming with. It was really awesome to meet you, Devin.
Yes, sir.
These are two super great guys. Check out Layne's YouTube channel. See you guys later.